Today, I have the great privilege of introducing Adam Cox to you. Adam is the owner of Cavendish Pianos in the UK. He reminds me of several hundred years ago when there were small piano makers dotting the landscape. Adam runs a company that is one of those small makers from yesteryear. Adam, why don't you tell us about your company, Cavendish Pianos, and what you represent?
Thanks, Glenn. Well, as you say, there's a great tradition of building pianos in the UK, in England in particular, that goes back about 200 years, really. We've got a great map on the wall in our in one of our workshops that it's a small area north of the Thames in London, centred around Camden Lock, if you know that area, and that was the piano making area of London. There would have been the jewelers area, the goldsmiths area. This was the piano making area. And believe it or not, in 1923, there were 150 makers just in that area alone. And they were all making fairly similar pianos, really, under different names and under different traditions. There would be the French tradition, the German tradition, and the English tradition, all working side by side. One of the things it shows is that you don't need a massive, great factory to produce pianos. We tend to think now, because of China and so on, that you need these buildings the size of football fields. You can do it in a very small area. We produce only around 50 pianos per year, which is a small output. And there's only 8 of us that work here, but we all have our set job. But having said that, everybody can do everybody else's job, it is a very traditional way of building pianos in a small way. We don't need the equipment here to build the cases, for example. They are built not far away, just over the hill that I'm looking at over there, that's covered in snow at the moment. On the other side of the hill there, there's a little town called Otley, and there's a cabinet maker there who builds our cabinets for us. So he makes them there, and then they're brought here. We have a string maker who's based in Oxfordshire, and it's called a craftsman's cooperative. So it's lots of different people. There's people in South Wales that do marquetry, and they make the names for our pianos. And there's several different examples where it all comes together under one roof here. A craftsman's cooperative is what it's been called.
That's great. And so what are the advantages of having small scale, small production pianos like you have there?
Well, a piano is only as good as the amount of time you spend making it. Quite often people say, "Oh, will it be ready soon, my piano?" And probably quite annoyingly, I say to them, well, the longer it takes, the better it'll be. And it is true that it takes quite a long time to make a piano anyway, but the slower you make it, the better products you'll have, as I'm sure you know, Glenn.
Yes.
You need to, the back posts, you make those and you let them rest. When you marry the soundboard to the back posts, you let it rest again before you put the frame in. If you do everything too quickly, you're going to create problems in the future. So if you do everything quite slowly, then of course the actual building of the action and so on is a slow and laborious operation. But if it's done, lovingly, and you're not having to complete 50 pianos a day, you do a beautiful job.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually incorporate solid wood into your pianos as well, with the cabinet making. And that's right. Quite a difference in today's manufacturing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think because of modern manufacturing techniques, where the virtually all piano makers are building upright pianos out of sheets of, boards that are cut on CNC machines, MDF. And they're usually black, which is, so it's all pretty cheap, really. It's what the consumers want. Everyone wants a black, shiny piano, which is pretty lucky for the piano makers, really, because it's the sort of cheapest possible material that you can use to build a piano. You don't have to have a wood grain. You can just paint it black and then put some lacquer over the top of it. But if you're building in wood, then you start to think about the properties of that wood and how it affects the sound. And my personal take on this is the reason that a lot of Far Eastern pianos are very loud is because they've been encased in an MDF coffin, you know, and they've got that sound's got to come out somehow. So they've got to be pretty loud. Whereas the English tradition of pianos is the flip side of that. It's as far away from that as you can imagine. They're very mellow pianos. They're very softly spoken pianos. And they don't need to be loud because they haven't got to get through 20 mil of MDF. And in fact, I don't know if you can see in the background, there's this is our Chatsworth model. That's made out of English oak. And it has the 3 panels there. Now, they're not just decorative. They are part of the design of the piano. That's what pianos used to look like in the olden days because they had no sheets of MDF. They had to build a frame and then make panels to go in it. And it just so happens that those panels are very thin and they're under tension and they act like a loudspeaker for the sound to come out. If I was to take that top board away and replace it with the top board of a modern Japanese piano, say, we'd all hear the difference. The piano would sound like it was a long way away. It would sound muffled. So the fact that the traditional method uses those 3 panels, it's not just to look nice, it has a function. And the whole of the piano resonates when you play a note. And the resonant properties of solid wood are very different and, in my opinion, better than you know, modern laminates and modern fiber boards and so on.
Right. And what actually what other contributing factors in terms of hammers and action do you put into your pianos?
Well, it's a good question. We had a sort of seminar here not so long ago, and we had the British Federation of Acousticians. So it was a load of people who knew far more about acoustics than I will ever know. And the question was, what factors contribute to the tone of your piano? Well, when we'd got to, I think we'd got near 100 factors, we stopped counting because every part of the piano affects the tone of the piano. So from the very smallest component, like the bridge pin, say, you know, that's the little pin that is hammered into the bridge that the string goes over. You know, you'd hardly think of it as being a part that affects the tone, but of course, if you make it out of different materials, you affect the tone. If you make it out of a different size, a different diameter, a different length, all these things, even on the smallest of components, affect the tone. So obviously, the hammers are going to have a massive effect on tone. The strings, the way that the soundboard is made. There's just so many factors that contribute to tone. It's often sort of condensed down to, oh, it's all about the hammers or it's all about the soundboard. It's so many different things that that's what makes pianos interesting. And I think that's partly why you can have 150 different piano makers, is because you're going to get this wide range of different. A very famous piano maker once said to me, it was Christian Bluthner actually, he said, making pianos is a bit like making biscuits. Everyone starts with the same kind of ingredients. You know, you got some sugar and you got some flour and you know, whatever it is, but you get all this different array of biscuits. Some are great, some are really expensive, and they all use very similar sort of techniques. And wine is also a good it's a good analogy as well. You'll have to edit this down a bit, I'm sure, Greg. So once I get going about pianos, that's it.
No, this is all great. You know, I do have to wrap this up, but I appreciate you taking the time and introducing us to your company. We're going to have to do a feature sometime on your factory there, and would really like to see the models more in depth. But yeah, I agree. It's like a good wine. There's subtleties between one to another, and you can play 100 pianos and have 100 different responses on how you play that piano. And part because we're dealing with natural products. We're dealing with wood and felt and leather and iron. They all come at you differently from even within the same maker. As you will know, you'll have one that slightly has a different edge than another piano. And that's just because we're dealing with raw materials that are natural. And that's part of the anomalies of the piano. So it's the joy of it to hear them make music that way.
Yeah, it's yeah. Quick word. When you're mentioning, you know, wood and felt and leather and strings, it's a kind of alchemy, really. If you put them together in the right way, you get something with a soul, something that sings, you know, and that's the real beauty of it.
Yeah, Adam, I think you should actually have Cavendish Piano's Alchemist on your on your apron.
Great idea.
Thanks so much for taking the time. This is a pleasure.
Thanks, Glenn. Look forward to seeing you again.
Yes, thank you.